In just a moment, I'm going to start sharing with you my absolute best day game tips. But before I do, one quick note. In this video, I'm focusing on things that are specific to day game and not just game in general. This is practical tips, actionable things you can do when you're out in the daytime and you see a hot girl. My first day game tip, and actually one of the first things you need to think about when doing day game, is where are you going to go? There's a big difference between walking around for hours and not seeing a single attractive girl to looking around everywhere and seeing lots of possibilities. Also, some venues where you go, it will be easier to actually approach the girls you see relative to others. My personal favorite day game venues are parks, outdoor malls, and places like the beach. Those are my absolute favorites because they attract attractive girls, especially if it's like a high-end mall or high-end sort of area of town. The girls, when they're there, are kind of in a mode where they're not doing business. They're not in a hurry to get somewhere. They're actually kind of having fun. They're relaxed, and they have some time in order to potentially meet someone. And also, the environment in these places is conducive to day game. It's not a crowded street in New York City where you're going to bump into random people in the middle of talking to the girl. And it's not a place where there are a ton of distractions. So my suggestion to you, if you don't know where to do day game in your city, get on Google first. Look up any parks. Those might be good places. Look up high-end shopping centers, especially outdoor ones. Look up if there is beach access, high-end hotels near the water, places people are just lounging, having a good time. Also, in a lot of cities, near the center of the city, there may be kind of an open area where there are maybe a bunch of restaurants around. There's a big open plaza, especially cities in Europe will have this a lot. Those can be great places for day game as well. Find those in your city, and then you know what? Go there. Walk around, and you're going to very quickly see which ones are the best. Another tip for day game. The closer you are to where you live, the better off you are overall. Because if a day game interaction goes well, there's a chance you could take the girl home. And if it goes moderately well and you get a phone number, the closer she lives to you, the better your chances of following up on it. So proximity does matter to some degree. Now, all of this assumes that you're going out specifically to do day game, which is a very good idea when you're learning, when you're practicing, and a great thing to just have as a habit in your life. But if you are out and about and you see a girl, there is no excuse not to talk to her. Just because you're not doing a day game session when you happen to see a cute girl at the coffee shop does not mean you shouldn't be approaching her then. Please, the best place to do day game is everywhere. But if you are going to structure a session, if you're going to go actively do day game, it will make a big difference if you go to good places. My next day game tip starts with a day game understanding, which is that if you go out and talk to girls in the daytime, you're going to be taking phone numbers or at least some form of contact. It could be Instagram if you have a good Instagram or whatever, but you're going to be taking contact of some kind. When that happens, there are two critical elements. Number one, make sure that she has your number in her phone or whatever the corollary to that is on a various app. Make sure that she follows you back or whatever. Make sure that there is that joint connection and she knows who the hell you are and connection is established. That's very, very, very critical. If you text a girl later and you come up as just a string of digits and she doesn't know who you are, that's way less powerful than if you come up with a name or even with a name and, some positive thing she thought about you or whatever. Okay, getting your number saved in her phone matters a ton. One of the best ways to do this is actually to put your number in her phone and text yourself from her phone or have her text you right then and there. That way, not only is the name saved, but there's also a text history, which is established with her texting you first. So when she looks later, she's going to remember fondly that moment when she texted you. That will bring her back to the moment when she was feeling great about the interaction and wanted to meet up with you. The other thing that's really going to help for making your contact information solid is staying 5 minutes or so, it's a rough approximation, after getting the number or after exchanging contact. If you go in, exchange contacts, and immediately leave, you look like what I call the phone number bandit. You look like I came for a phone number, got my phone number, and now I'm out. Got to get to the getaway car as soon as possible. Right? You don't want to have it look that way. The idea behind a phone number or whatever contact information is, it's a bridge. The idea is you and the girl have decided you like each other, you've decided you want to meet up, and now you're hanging out in those next 5 minutes as people who have agreed they like each other. And the amount of comfort that is established once you're talking and have agreed you like each other is much bigger than the amount of comfort in a similar amount of time beforehand. So if you could have an interaction of, say, 15 minutes meeting the girl, get the number and leave, versus 5 minutes meeting her and getting the number, and then another 5 minutes after getting the number, that 10-minute interaction, the shorter interaction with 5 minutes after the number, is almost always going to be more solid than the 15-minute interaction where you got the number and left. Okay? So it's very, very important that time spent after you've agreed you like each other. That time spent where you already achieved something, you already got the phone number, and now you don't look like you have an agenda, you look like you're genuinely enjoying meeting the girl. It makes her much more feel like when you meet up with her for a date, it's going to be calm and cool and normal. And it's giving her a sample of what the date with you is going to be like. My next day game tip is a critical one, but one that I don't want you to over apply. And you'll understand what I mean by that in a second. So when you're out talking to girls in the daytime, there's certain situations that are more favorable for you. For example, if a girl's by herself, that's more favorable than if she's with a bunch of friends. For example, if she's sitting down, that's more favorable than if she's walking. And also if she's standing and stationary, that's more favorable than if she's walking. If a girl's in a group of all girls, that's typically more favorable than if she's in a mixed group of girls and guys. Now, that said, all approaches are technically doable. I have approached mother-daughter groups in the daytime and charmed the mother, won over the daughter, and had it go incredibly, incredibly well. Okay, so that can be done. I have walked up and talked to groups of guys and girls in the daytime and walked away with the hottest girl's number or even more. So all of these things are possible, but on a percentage basis, it really does make a difference who you're approaching. It should be fairly obvious that if a girl's in a hurry somewhere, it's going to be harder to have a good interaction with her than if she has all the time in the world. It should be fairly obvious that if it's just a girl and you have her undivided attention and no friends there to judge her, it's going to be an easier situation than if there are a bunch of friends that you also have to deal with and kind of keep happy throughout the interaction. It should be fairly obvious that oftentimes if a girl is with a guy, there's some kind of connection there. It may not even actually be a boyfriend, but it's at the very least some kind of a distraction. And even if it is just a friend or just a coworker, it would still be better if she were alone. So all of these things will increase your percentages. Now, I want you to approach whenever you think a girl's attractive. So how do you actually apply this? Why do I actually tell you this piece? Well, it matters for a few different reasons. Number one, if you're in a place and you can choose between a few different approaches, choose the more likely one, right? So if you're in a coffee shop and there's a couple attractive girls in that coffee shop, one of whom is sitting alone doing nothing, one of whom is a big group of girls and guys, and they're relatively equal in terms of attractiveness, you're better off approaching the girl who's by herself. That's a simple thing. Number two, when you're determining where to go, you want to think about that. Is it a place that girls actually go alone? Or is it a place that girls go in big groups and you have a lot of more difficulty? Or when girls go to a place, are they actually sitting and enjoying the place, or are they just walking through quickly? I know there are a lot of places where there are attractive girls, but they're in a hurry, and there are other places nearby where the attractive girls are seated. I will prefer the place where the girls are seated over the place where they're in a hurry all day, every day. Also, if you are a beginner and you're emotionally fragile at all, it does help to get some success along the way. So while eventually I do want you approaching all of the different girls, if you're nervous to even do an approach, by all means, just approach the girls who are sitting down alone at first, and then you can build up to eventually approaching girls that are walking with guys. All right, so especially in your learning progression, it's nice to do the low-hanging fruit, do the easier approaches first, get some successes, and build up. That's completely fine as part of an overall process where you're eventually going to approach every girl you're interested in. So, personal story with this. When I was starting to do day game, I was on a college campus, and I had a rule that I would approach every girl. But to me, what that actually meant is I would approach every girl who was not moving and not with friends, right? And when girls are in groups, I didn't know how to do that yet. And I did that for probably a year and a half before I learned how to eventually approach groups. And I got tons of experience, I got tons of dates from it, and then eventually I got a little bolder, got a little more skillful when I started approaching groups. That's completely fine as part of a progression. Even if you never get to the level of doing complicated day game approaches, you can have an incredible dating life just approaching girls who are alone in the daytime. My next day game tip also has a tiny asterisk, but let me explain the tip first. The tip is basically this. As compared to night game, i.e. meeting girls in bars, clubs, parties, the amount of game in your game can be dramatically less in day game, okay? So there's a certain amount of time when you're talking to a girl when you're doing tactics. You're doing things that are emotional spikes. You're doing push-pulls. You're doing teases. You're being overtly cocky, etc. You're being gamey. You're going to do less of that proportionately in day game than you would in night game, in a bar, club, party environment. You're going to have more in day game of normal conversation. You're going to have more of telling stories, more of occasionally asking questions, hopefully still not too many questions, but there's more of a get-to-know-you aspect in day game than there would be in night game. See, I divide communication in game into two categories, what I call baseline, which is normal conversation, and plotline, which is the spiky, gamey stuff. In day game, there's more baseline and less plotline as compared to night game. So if you've done a lot of night game and you're shifting over to day game, tone down the game a little bit. Spend more time genuinely getting to know the girl. Spend more time genuinely connecting. You see, it's less common for approaches to happen in daytime than in nighttime. And so the very fact that you're doing an approach already is fairly gamey, already does get a lot of notice from the girl, and already does make you stand out, so you don't have to do as many gamey things on top of it. Now here's the asterisk. I'm talking about the difference between day game and night game. I'm talking about shifting from how you would do night game to how you do day game. Most guys in all forms of game have too little game in their game. So if this is you, if you talk to a girl and it's a total platonic conversation in nowhere, you actually still need more game in your game than what you currently have, okay? You still need some. The point is that the ideal mix you're looking for is a ratio with more normal conversation and less game in it. If there's no game in your game, it's still too little. You do need some. My next day game tip. As soon as the girl likes you, and that doesn't mean she's in love with you, doesn't mean she wants to sleep with you, as soon as she socially likes you and is contributing to the conversation, you need to start becoming a problem solver. You need to start thinking, what is the possibility of this interaction? What is going on, and how can I maximize the situation that I'm in? So here's what I mean. If a girl is walking when you start talking to her, you want to find out very quickly how far is she going. Because if she's walking for half an hour and you have a long time to potentially get to know her, well, now you can do things very slowly, you can take your time, you can do good game. But on the other hand, you may have to justify why you're going to walk with her for a long time. You may need to deal with problem solving that so it doesn't look weird. If the girl's only going a block, on the other hand, you may have to do things much more quickly. You may need to use some false time constraints. You may need to rush some elements so that you have actually achieved a decent conversation by the time that block comes up. So that's going to change things dramatically. If the girl is alone and hanging out all day doing nothing, you should very much consider taking the girl on an instant date rather than just settling for a phone number. On the other hand, if your girl's meeting her friends in 5 minutes, you should strongly angle for a phone number, get decent amount of qualification done, and go ahead and get the phone number and plan to meet up with her later. But you need to know these things. It's incredibly frustrating to be doing a really good game and having a girl totally love you, and then her friends show up, whisk her away, and you don't even get a phone number because it all happened so fast. That is incredibly frustrating. It's also incredibly wasteful to have a girl who loves you and is able to hang out all day, and you just take a phone number and leave and try and hang out with her a different day. That's also really silly. So you need to figure out the situation you're dealing with, and you need to adapt to it. And again, as soon as the girl is liking, up until the point where she's contributing to the conversation and having a really good time, just focus on doing good game and getting her to like you. But as soon as you start to see some indicators of interest, she's continuing the conversation when she doesn't have to, she's asking you questions, she's giggling at your jokes, she's kind of blushing happily, all of those kind of signs, okay, she likes me. Now, how do I actually turn a good set that kind of feels pleasant into something that's actually going to get me the best chance of turning this into a relationship with this girl? This next tip is one that almost nobody does intentionally, but you absolutely should. And the tip is this: don't be afraid to use a prop. When you're walking around talking to girls in the daytime, they're going about their lives. If a girl is at a mall, she's likely shopping or meeting friends. If a girl's at the beach, she's likely trying to get a tan or just hanging out or meeting friends or something like that. If your purpose there is simply to do game, that's a little bit weird to her. If it seems like you're also participating in going about your life and the meetup with her was very random and spontaneous, that's much more charming, that's much more romantic, that's a lot less try-hard, it conveys less agenda. In general, it is just better. So for example, if you met a girl in a mall and you happened to have a shopping bag of clothes you had purchased in that mall, it would seem a lot more normal for you to be there than if you're just walking around with nothing. Or if you are on campus at a college or a grad school and you happen to have a backpack, it makes a lot more sense that you're there than if you're just walking around with no supplies of any kind. What are you doing here on campus? A simple prop, to be honest, would be just a coffee cup. If you're walking around somewhere that people are lounging and people have coffee, if you have a coffee cup in your hand, it looks like you at least purchased a coffee instead of just walking around doing day game as your sole focus. One great example of this, fun story of one of my past coaches, he went to a high-end mall to do day game. And what he did is he actually went to one of the more high-end trendy stores at that mall and he purchased something and he got a shopping bag with his purchase. Then he went and returned the item and then put his own clothes inside the shopping bag later on and just walked around when he did day game with the bag from that high-end store, which said two things. Number one, I'm here shopping, so this just happened. Number two, I shop at this high-end store, so that's social proof. Clever little maneuver on his part, and not a bad idea at all. Next day game tip, absolutely critical to getting the interaction to go well. When you see the girl, you need to make a decision whether you're going to try and stop her or walk with her. And this is going to make a huge difference in how the start of the interaction goes. All things being equal, if you can get the girl to stop and talk with you, that is better. She's more invested, you have her full attention, and it's a lot easier to then take her on things like an instant date or whatever. So all things being equal, if it's possible to stop her, you should. But a lot of times you may not be able to. If she's walking very fast, it may be hard to get her to stop. If it's a group of girls, it may be harder to get all of them to stop than it would be if it was just one girl. So you need to make that decision and you need to commit to it. One of the worst ways to approach is to go halfway. If you kind of half commit to stopping her and half commit to walking with her, you're going to do a terrible job of either one, and the start of the approach is going to be pretty damn awkward. So you want to make that strong decision which one you're doing and go with it. If, for example, you try and stop the girl and she doesn't stop, you can switch to walking with her because at that point you have nothing to lose. It's still much better to commit one way or the other. And if you do commit to the switch to walking with her, commit fully to walking with her at that point. Okay, make a strong commitment. Do one or the other well. Don't do both half-assed. Half-assed both usually fails. My next day game tip is something you've probably heard of, but you probably don't do it. And even if you do it, you probably don't do it well or as often as you should. And that is using the false time constraint. False time constraints are absolute gold in day game, and they can be used in so many settings so well. Let's say you open a girl and you're trying to get her to stop, and she sort of half stops. She's like kind of turned away, leaning in, leaning out. At that moment, hey, I have to go in a minute, but all of a sudden the girl turns back and gives you her attention. Because when she knows it's just for a couple of minutes, she's more willing to commit, she buys in, and you can actually get her to stop. Let's say a girl's sitting down and you want to sit with her. As you're sitting, use a false time constraint to make it seem like not as big of a deal. That's going to make it far more common and far smoother for you to sit down. Let's say you're talking to a girl and it's going well, you want to take her on an instant date. It's a good idea to false time constrain the instant date because that makes it less of a big deal, makes her more likely to say yes. The false time constraint is so useful in so many areas of game. Please do not neglect it. My next tip is specific to if you decide to walk with a girl when you do the opener. Please, please, please get half a step in front of her when walking with, as opposed to half a step behind. If the girl's walking and you're half a step behind her, it looks and feels creepy. It feels like you're chasing her. It feels like she's almost running away from you. Also, whenever she talks to you, she has to turn all the way around backwards. And that's, number one, awkward. Number two, very hard to do while walking. Have you ever tried walking and looking backwards? It's not an easy thing, okay? Get a half a step in front, make it easy for her to engage with you rather than hard. Another couple benefits of being half a step in front. If you are half a step in front, when you come to a crossroads, it puts you in a much better situation to lead or adjust to changing direction or going in a different direction. And also, if you're half a step in front, you can actually go from walking with her to stopping her very easily. So if you're walking at a set pace, take a slow step when you're standing in front of her and see what happens. If she also slows down, go ahead and come to a stop. If she goes at normal speed and catches up to you, just speed back up to have a step in front of her and continue walking as though nothing happened. For so many reasons, it's better to walk half a step in front rather than even or behind the girl. Next tip, if the girl is walking towards you and you want to get her to stop, I highly recommend stopping from some distance. If you get too close before you say your first word, she can take one step and she's already past you, and now it's very awkward for her to stop. If instead she was some distance away from you, usually I actually like to be about 10 feet away, like 3 yards or so away, which seems a lot. And if in doubt, even go a little further. 12 yards is probably better than 8, right? Be a decent distance in front of her, because by doing that, there's a sample of your time, a sample of your presence, of your personality, where she's walking a few steps, seeing you, making eye contact with you, and it's actually much more awkward for her not to stop than to stop in this case. The other critical reason to be farther away is if you are a bit further away in the open, you can actually be directly in front of her, which means that in order not to talk to you, she'd have to actually change course. If you're too close and stopping directly in front of her, it's incredibly jarring, incredibly invasive, and it will make the girl very, very uncomfortable. But if you're quite a distance away in front of her, it's not uncomfortable at all, but her most natural path is right into a conversation with you rather than walking past you. If you are a decent distance and good angle when trying to get the girl to stop, it will dramatically increase the number of girls that stop and talk to you instead of walking by. Next day game tip. If and when you approach girls that are walking in groups, you absolutely must address the front girl. I see it so often that a guy will talk to the girl they're interested in, which is the girl in the back of the group, and the rest of the group keeps walking. And in this case, it's actually even worse sometimes if the girl you're talking to likes you and decides to stop, because now her friends are walking and they call her forward, they come back and grab her. Whenever you're in this situation with girls walking, you need to talk to the front one, even if the front one is not the one you're most interested in. And especially if you're trying to get the girls to stop, you need to stop the front one. And if you stop the front one and another one becomes the front one, you now need to stop the new front one. That is absolutely critical to dealing with girls walking. If you don't do this, you're going to have a lot of situations where you're talking to a girl, she likes you, and her friends drag her away. This next tip is so subtle, but so absolutely critical, and most guys, even advanced guys, don't do that. And that is use a pre-opener. A lot of guys are so obsessed with their opener, and by the way, I'll talk about the opener in a minute on another one of these tips, but a lot of guys are so obsessed with the opener, they can't wait to deliver it. And even if the girl's already engaged, they just go out of their way to deliver their opener. The opener isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is getting her attention and getting her to talk. And if you deliver your opener as the first words out of your mouth, she may miss half of your opener. She may not know you're talking to her yet. And so in this case, your opener comes off very, very awkward. Say, for example, you walk over to a girl and you say, I thought you're cute and I wanted to talk to you. And she doesn't even know you're talking to her until the word and. That's very awkward. So what I really recommend is I start almost every day game approach with simply, hey, excuse me, pause briefly, and then go into my opener. And I want to make sure that the girl is actually looking at me at the start of my opener. I want to make sure I have her attention and she hears the full of the opener if I'm going to use one. This seems like a subtle tip, but it literally is night and day for your results on the open. Please, please, please use a pre-opener. Next tip, if you want to be really good at day game. See, pretty good at day game is going out and getting numbers and getting dates, and that is great. And that's what I did at the start of my day game career. But really good at day game is when you have a good interaction, taking a girl on a date right then and there. If you want to do that, it's so important that you know where you can take the girl. If you go do day game at a particular shopping center, for example, you should know where are the nearby coffee shops, ice cream places, bars. You also should maybe have a good idea of where some of the stores are and what the layout of the place is. You also ideally should have an idea of some good bars, coffee shops, ice cream places, parks near your house if you want to eventually take a girl home. If you don't have a plan, you are literally planning to fail. If you're trying to figure out on the spot where you're going to go, that hesitation, that delay may end up ruining your set, or at the very least, it will make things far less smooth than if you happen to know. Now, weird side note on this. Even though you do know where the places are, it is a good idea to actually act like you're thinking, right? If you're too smooth, like, oh yeah, there's a coffee shop right over here, be like, yeah, I'd love to get a coffee, I think. Yeah, Starbucks, perfect, let's go to that Starbucks. It should look in the moment like you're actually making a decision, not like you made the decision 3 hours ago. But it is important to know the resources available to you along the way. My final day game tip for you is probably one of the ones you were waiting for at the start, which is what the heck do I say on the open? And I'm going to give you not just the open, I'm going to give you an opening format and an opening game and a useful thing you can do during your entire day game session all at once. And this is something I do a lot with my students on bootcamp. See, day game is one of the absolute best forms of game. And if I had a choice of meeting a girl in day game versus anywhere else, I would absolutely choose day game. But there is one major downside of day game, which is that sometimes you're walking around for a period of time and not finding any attractive girls. If I'm on a bootcamp program and I'm with my students and we have a period where it's a little hard to find girls for a moment, here's an exercise I do with them. I will point out girls, not for them to open, but for them to practice this exercise with. And the goal is this. When I point out a girl, they have to say the first observation, the first thought they have, the first thing that comes to mind when they see the girl. And just say it. Not to the girl, but just to me. And then once they've said that, they're going to turn into a push-pull. So if what they said was positive, they'll follow it with a negative. If what they said was negative, they'll follow it with a positive, and that turns into a push-pull. If what they say is neutral, they can follow with either a positive or a negative. So if it was something neutral, like, I see you're wearing a black shirt, then you could follow with a negative, like, yeah, that goth look really isn't in anymore. Or I see you're wearing a black shirt with a positive would be like, I really appreciate a girl with a classy look, right? So you can turn it either positive or negative. But the idea is you're getting reps. Even if you're not doing actual opens, you're getting reps of openers, you're getting reps of push-pulls, you're getting reps of being flirty. And this idea of say the first thing that comes to mind and then turn it into a tease, especially a push-pull, is an incredibly good opening format because it's effective, it gets attention, it's personal, and it can never look like a pickup line because it's actually specific to the girl. So this is actually one of the absolute best opening formats, right? One of the best formats you can have for opening is when a girl catches your attention and you like it, state the thing you noticed and then turn it into a tease. Turn it into something that is personal and a little bit flirty. One of the best opening formats, and you can practice this all the time. So what are the takeaways out of this tip? Number one, you have an opening format that's pretty universal. You can use it anytime. Number two, you have something to do in day game that's going to keep you sharp, keep you in the moment, keep you in state, keep you ready to open when you have those periods in between approaches. Because a lot of guys during those periods, they get bored, they get out of state, they start to get nervous and get their approach anxiety back. If you keep yourself sharp this way, it's going to make your next open easier, and it's going to make all your opens easier because you're actually developing a skill while doing it. So I highly suggest use this exercise or something like it. If you're walking around and you're not finding attractive girls, ask yourself, what would I open that girl with? What would I open that girl with? And when you do eventually find the girl you like, there's going to be no hesitation about opening her because you've just opened 10 girls in the last 5 minutes, at least in your mind. Now, I know I said the last tip was my final tip. Actually, here's my final tip. It's one that should be obvious, but it is super, super important. The way you dress and the way you look matters a ton. So if you go out to do day game, wear nice clothes, dress well, dress your best, do your hair. But you know what? Even beyond that, day game happens everywhere. Day game happens anytime. It's a really good idea to make it a habit whenever you leave your house, look good. You don't want to be out running a random errand, see the girl of your dreams, and then have it in your head, oh shit, I look like shit, I can't do this approach. Instead, be like, I look awesome as usual, I'm the man, I'm going to do this approach and go meet her. And I have met girls in some of the most random scenarios. I have met girls like when a random pizza girl delivers a pizza at my house and she's hot and I meet her. I have met girls at random stores. I have met girls, just walking through the park on my way to somewhere else. The abundance of opportunities is staggering, but each opportunity is better if you're prepared for it. If you look your best in day-to-day life, if each and every time you walk out of the house you look at least presentable, it's going to dramatically improve your success in day game. So that's the video. If you guys have any other questions, anything else you'd like to hear about day game, post it below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.